Um, don't all go, come back. No, don't all leave. We've got an amazing panel next on EventWell, Wellbeing in the events industry. It is a great topic. It's a great topic. We're going to blog about it. We're going to... Oh, sorry. Sit down. Jump up, jump around. Huh? I think we all need to be closer. Yeah. I think we need a hug. Yeah.
Welcome to this panel talking about the future of events. What changed in the way that we produce events and in the visitor to make curation and customization so important?
Social media gives us the ability to extend the event beyond the on-site.
There's been a shift in that it's kind of now the visitor that tells you what they expect at the event, as opposed to having the event planning companies suggesting what would work best for them.
Sort of my counter-argument to tech is that, yes, the power of the pre-event conversation, but isn't there something wonderful about, you know, the curtain going back and you're exposed to that experience?
Righty-ho, here we go. Eyes down, look in. Oh, I was waiting for the noise to stop. They're out there, aren't they? Am I out? Oh. We're going to follow up the subject we raised earlier in another talk, that of well-being, and we have another amazing panel. I don't know how EventLab have done it, these amazing panels. And I just want to introduce Helen Moo of EventWell. Helen?
Yes, I'm coming.
Come on. So we're broadcasting live on Facebook.
Yeah.
So they're going to run a video while you introduce your panel.
Right, okay.
Oh, you've done it. Oh, we're off. We're broadcasting live.
We're broadcasting live. Okay.
Your mics are there.
There we go. Thank you very much. Welcome, guys. So, without further ado, let's introduce a lovely panel. I'll start with the gentlemen, actually, because they're here, if that's okay. So you girls can make your entrance. Al Turner, Managing Director of 8PR and Marketing and UK Chair of ILIA UK. Mark Mayer, Events Director at Boulevard Events. The very lovely Sam Allen, Managing Director of Sequoia Partnership and BVEP Vice Chair. Laura Capel-Abra, firm coach of No More Ifs and Buts and founder of Stress Matters. And Colin Bullen, last but no means least, consulting lead and head at Habits at Work. Okay, so welcome. For those that don't know me, Helen Means, I'm Managing Director of EWR Club. I'm going to be moderating this panel. What we wanted to do for this panel, because we realised obviously it's the last one before the end, second before last before the end of the day, get my words out properly. We wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm Managing Director of EventWell Club. EventWell, we organise monthly events that are centred around discussion and debate, so they're very, very interactive. We steer away from monologue, and we ask the attendees to join in with the thought leaders and hosts in terms of the topic that we'll be discussing. So obviously our topical debate today is how can we implement better wellbeing for event professionals. So I'm going to ask each of the guys here, our lovely panellists, to just do a little opener in terms of what their thoughts are. And then we're going to be wanting you guys on Glisser to be sending in those questions, which I've just realised as well I don't have a Glisser app.
It's on the,
Does it just come up on there?
it's on the EventLab.
Oh, is it? I don't have that.
Oh, no, it'll come behind you.
It's going to come up on there. Right, okay. Perfect. There we go. Should have got that sorted in the first place. Okay, so shall we get started? Are you ready? Have you all got the Glisser app? Are you ready to send in your questions? Yes. Okay, so question again, how can we implement better wellbeing for events professionals? Colin, I'm going to start with you.
Before I start, is it coming through? Before I start, how many of you were at the presentation I gave at 3:15? Not many. Fantastic. So I can say a few of the things that I said there. So our business is Habits of Work, actually a Chicago-based consultancy. We specialise in helping organisations create performance through health, happiness and security change, and security being in relation to financial security. It's about getting people to practice a different set of habits. Changing behaviour is very difficult to achieve. And we help organisations structure what we call contexts around the workplace in order to create that. So in terms of the wellbeing industry, you're no different to any other in the sense that the majority of you will feel stressed out, you're working long hours, you're working in a very pressurised environment. What we're looking to do is create contexts which encourage people to make decisions in their lives which lead to them being healthier, being happier, and being more financially secure. I'll explore that a little bit more as we get into the presentation.
Excellent. Laura, did you want to
I'll answer the question.
Yes.
So I used to run an events agency, and I'm now a career coach, particularly working with the events industry. And from my side, it's a lot about communication. And actually, once we have people talking to each other, whether or not that's a coach or your friend or a family member or somebody at work, it really does help impact people's well-being. And one of the things that I think we need to do as an industry is look at how we can start to change the culture of the industry. We don't want to change the industry. We love this industry. That's why we're in it. But there are definitely some things around the levels of stress in the industry that I think as a group of professionals through EventWell and through Stress Matters, we can try and change people's relationship with stress and change the reputation that we have in this industry that I think is one of the things that tends to harm our own well-being.
Yeah. Sam?
She took my answer. Just joking. Just joking. It's the end of the day, just a bit of humour. Laughter makes you stress-free.
Yes.
I think in terms of the SMEs, the smaller companies in our industry, of which there are a lot. Anyone here a small business? There's quite a few of us. Is to not look at this as something separate to our day-to-day activity, to our jobs, to our companies, to our businesses. And this can go to organisations as well, which I think Mark would agree with. This is absolutely part of performance. So, to be fit, to be mindful, to allow you to be creative, which is the industry we're in, we need to make sure that we're looking after both our physical and mental well-being. The two, and I suppose that's it, is to remember that those two are inextricably linked. One will have a really big effect on the other. So in terms of that, that's what I would say, and plenty of other things to say, but that's it from me.
Absolutely. Mark, do you want to lead on?
I think they were all excellent points. It was kind of summed up a little bit for me when we had the changeover. So it comes down a little bit to priorities. And, the talk before was about how to become a social media influencer. And we're half as busy now as we were then. It might just be because Jason had a lovely orange, yellow vest on. But I think it comes down to your priorities. And for me, health and well-being is number one. It's just as simple as that. It doesn't, before you get to work, before you get anywhere. And if you're talking as sort of a business owners, and essentially we do have the power to implement infrastructure within the companies that allow and support positive health behaviours, and that's obviously important. But the thing that you alluded to, Colin, about changing behaviours, essentially that is the root of what we're trying to do. And it doesn't matter how much infrastructure you put in place. If people don't want to change and they're not consistently surrounded by an environment that supports that change, then we're not going to get there. And for me, it comes down to, at the core of it, is being personally accountable to yourself. So let's talk in metaphors. Everyone learns better that way. If you're lucky enough to work in a company and maybe you sit opposite Sally and she comes in every day, she's buzzing, she's been to the gym, sipping on her green juice, she's talking about yoga, she's reading books about sleep, and that kind of rubs off on the people around her. Maybe she sits next to James starts drinking his green juice, then maybe you start booking yoga classes. And before we know it, we've got momentum and everyone's involved in these health behaviours and we're getting somewhere. What happens when James gets a new job and he goes down the road and maybe they don't have that culture? And maybe they, instead of sipping green juice, they're sipping cocktails, and maybe they're not talking about yoga, maybe they're talking about going out raving at the weekends. Nothing wrong with either of those behaviours at all. But it's a different environment. Do you think that James is going to carry on sipping his green juice for very long? Probably not. And it's about, yes, we do have a responsibility as business owners to try and create these environments, but at the end of the day, on an individual level, we have to become more accountable to ourselves and not accountable to the environment that we're in.
So for the last 13 years, I've kind of been a bit of a professional cheerleader for the events industry. I've been PRing in the industry, for the industry, to the industry. And I like talking about the best things of the events industry. This is one of the things where I think we all need to have an AA meeting and accept that we have a problem. And the one thing I learned from a coffee with Helen over 6 to, let's say, 8 months ago, to where we are right now, is that this industry has a major issue that we are only just beginning to understand how big this is. And I think what I'm interested in as someone that cares about this industry is how we deal with it. But I think the first thing we need to understand is we have a problem. And I think anyone that thinks that we don't is whistling Dixie. We have a major issue, and I'm interested to see what the industry reaction is, because it will tell us a lot about ourselves as practitioners, but it will tell us how good our industry is, how professional it is, how adept it is to deal with problems, and I'm interested about how that works out.
So let's start off. I talked about openness and honesty in the last one. I've talked very openly and honestly about my own struggles with mental health. I have bipolar disorder. I've had it for 28 years. I've been in the industry for 20. So luckily, it's got nothing to do with me being an event professional. It was actually the onset, happened in my teens, which is when the most people that would suffer from bipolar disorder, that's when it's going to happen. The onset will come on. But it was actually diagnosed in 2009 when I experienced the biggest burnouts that I've ever had, because of the role that I had in the industry at the time, where I was everywhere. And it was actually through that burnout that I was diagnosed and ended up managing to get the help that I needed and was able to go and talk to people and get that support. I've been open and honest just now. Let's have a show of hands then. Who at some point in their careers has experienced stress burnout, mental health problem? We've got 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands, 4, 5, 6. That pretty much covers a stat that I'm about to give you. The EventWell research that we carried out for UK Event Wellbeing Week identified that 1 in 3 event professionals will suffer from a mental health illness at some point in their careers. 1 in 3. So that's higher than the 1 in 4. But the problem that we have is that most do not feel able to approach a manager or colleagues in their workplaces for support. So we've got people suffering in silence more than anything else. So I suppose if I present that question back to the panel now then, in terms of lines of communication, how can we improve that? How can we open it up so that people are getting the support and help they need?
I've got the microphone. This is my favourite subject. It comes down to leadership. If your leaders in your organisation are not having this conversation, it's not going to happen. I've been lucky enough as part of Team EventWell to be speaking at a lot of events and listening more than actually speaking to what's happening in organisations in our industry. And back to what Al says, it's a really big problem and we need to address this urgently. Leadership within not every organisation, because we have some great leaders in our industry as well, and we need to learn from those people. But if we don't start from top down in this particular incident, then we have a real challenge. So I would say leaders in the industry, you really need to learn. You really need to have the resources. You can't just do this, and we appreciate that. I'm, in my organisation, everyone's organisations. So seek that advice, seek that support. It exists for us now in terms of eventwell.org. But yeah, for me, it's a leadership problem.
Yeah.
I also have a microphone. I want to take that leadership point forward as well. I think within the events industry, we're very, very good at presenting rosy pictures, and we're very, very good at presenting wonderful, flowery, beautiful outcomes. What we're not very good at is getting our hands dirty and delving into the crap. Now, what we saw in EventWell Week is lots of people shout out. It's actually, no, lots of corporate businesses shout out and talk about the brilliant things they are doing with Wellbeing, and that's just great. But what we had loads of, with lots of people not shouting about all the horrible things that they're going through at the moment. And every time we did one of these sessions, we had a number of people coming in with glassy eyes, teary eyes, just needing a release. I think, unfortunately, and it's strange to say, as a PR cheerleader person, it's those things that we need to talk about, because until we start talking about that, leadership won't change, things like that. I had one more thought on leadership, and then I'll pass the mic on. The people that pay for events are businesses and brands, and they don't want this. I've spoken to a number of major companies, Barclays, EY, Google. I've talked to them about this issue. They do not want this to happen. They don't allow it in their industry. They don't allow it in their businesses. And if we don't show ourselves responsive in front of them, they will drop us like a bad habit.
Yeah, I think we're an industry of yes people, and I'm very aware, and I'm sure it's the case, how many people have always been, someone said, I'm a bit stressed, I've got quite a lot on. How many people have just been told to man up, or don't worry, it'll be over in the next 2 weeks, but inevitably 2 weeks come and then the next event comes and there's no real break. We used to have these big cycles, and we used to have 4 months where it's quite quiet, and that doesn't happen anymore, and we're constantly going from thing to thing to thing. And I absolutely agree. I think it's completely leadership that is what can help change the culture. It's all very well us all saying, yay, come on, we'll be really healthy and we'll really talk about our feelings and things like that. But if your boss is sitting there and saying, get back to work, or he's saying you have to be in the office 9 till 5 and you're not allowed to work flexible hours, for example, that's where problems have. If you need to pop out to go to the dentist or the doctor and you're being made to feel bad about that because you're not in the office, that's a cultural issue, and that's where the leaders can change that. And actually what we need to be doing is helping the leaders, helping those employers change the way they work with their people and put people at the heart of their resourcing. Clearly a business is to make money, and we're all aware of that. We're not trying to say spend loads of money on things that actually you're not going to see the return on. But we genuinely believe that actually if you care for your people and you put well-being at the heart of what you're doing, you'll get it back. You'll be more efficient. Think about on a Monday morning when you're looking forward to work, how productive you are when you go into the office and you start working, compared to a Monday when you are not looking forward to work and you're really stressed out. Actually, you're really unproductive and you're not very efficient, and you're more likely to make mistakes and cost the company money. And actually it's about showing employers that it's worth, any kind of investment into this, because it will pay off, not just in terms of everybody being happier and being healthier. Actually, it will help people's finances in the long run, because they'll have people that aren't going off on burnout for 3 months because they can't deal with it anymore. Actually, they'll be there, and it's more of a sustainable approach to business, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you sort of touched on where I was going to go with it, and I kind of do agree that leaders have a responsibility, but let's not miss the fact that, look, take Jason for example. He's a leader in the influencer market. I run my own business. We speak at events. We're all influencers in this industry. We're all, quote, leaders in this industry. We talk about our troubles all the time. So doesn't mean we've all got it figured out. So to place that added responsibility on our leaders to sort of supposedly know how to figure it all out for people is not... I completely agree. But I'm just clarifying, which is, I think that's what you were saying, but I'm just clarifying it. So I think that we need to. It's about two-way communication. It's about opening lines of communication so that people feel comfortable talking to their leaders, and that leaders feel comfortable talking to the people that are their mentors and the people and so on and so on.
I agree with everything that's been said. My vision is one of industry organisations, events business, where we don't actually even have to ask these questions, that it's quite natural for people to talk to each other and feel comfortable in each other's space. There's this thing about leaders, and picking up on Laura's point, that the science is actually unequivocal. It's very clear that you perform better, you produce more, you're more productive if you are healthy, happy and secure. And if you continue with this, what we refer to as the corporate hero archetype, it's almost this suicidal belief that hard work generates more. We will, as a consequence of thinking like that, of doing 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, whatever it is, working through weekends, never putting down the phones, you'll burn out and you will become ill at some point in time, and that is not serving you, and it is not serving the businesses that you work for. The business case, anybody who wants to get into the detail of it, is absolutely unequivocal. It's much better to help your people take the rest that they need during the course of the day. Take 10-minute breaks, not 10 minutes to go and check on emails, 10 minutes where you're in quiet space. You're much more creative. You're going to generate a better business for your organisation as a consequence of that.
Yeah. I suppose the next question, we've got some questions come up here. So wellbeing can be such a minefield for some leaders and managers. It can be difficult. So is there a case then to have wellbeing managers in work who specialise within that specific area? Laura, do you want to open on that one?
I think that would be lovely if we have that, but I think it's a wider thing than that. Just if you've got one person that you can go and talk to, I don't think that changes the culture, and I think that's, I keep saying it, but I think that is one of the biggest problems, is that there's an expectation that we'll just keep going and we'll keep being workhorses. And, with the Stress Matters research that 20% of people in the events industry work more than 60 hours a week. I mean, people get paid for 37.5 hours most of the time. That seems a bit ridiculous that we don't, but people just do it and they expect that they have to do it and they just accept it. Whereas I think wellbeing manager would be great, and I think it would definitely help. But that I think then that's a kind of an easy excuse for companies to say, well, we've got a wellbeing manager and therefore we're okay and we've ticked a box. And I think it needs to be bigger than that. I think actually it needs to be about changing the approach, and whether or not that's helping. And I agree that actually it's not just on the leader and one person to have all the answers, because they have a different job to do. But whether or not it needs training to help people. But I do think there's a responsibility for everybody in the organisation just to watch out for your peers. And if your peer, if your colleague that comes into work every day at 8 a.m. normally starts coming in at 7 or 9. That change in behaviour is where we need to start watching these flags and just look out for each other. And you can't always do that if there's one person who sits in an office being called wellbeing manager. So I think it would be a good thing to do, but I don't think it should be a tick box that then means nothing else happens as well.
Absolutely agree. Just to give some perspective on that as well, additional research we did at EventWell identified that 75% of event professionals have put workload and responsibilities as the main cause of their stress. We decided to delve a little bit deeper into that. We weren't just going to accept that it was workload and responsibilities. We wanted to find out exactly what was going on. Are we, as professionals, as an industry, are we putting pressure on each other, talking about supplier and buyer relationships with venues, with the planners coming in, the menu planning? All that stuff went by the sides. When we actually delved deeper, we found out that it was pressure from the top, so pressure from top management, relationships at work, and the relationships with managers and colleagues that were causing the stress. So that puts a completely different perspective. I think there was a thing that came out, event coordination is the 5th most stressful job. Well, actually, from EventWell's research, it really isn't, because we're actually loving what we do. We're actually loving the jobs of being an event coordinator. So it's being an event coordinator is not making us stress. It's that workplace culture that the guys have touched on here that's stressing us out. It is that Monday morning feeling of not wanting to go into work and probably ringing in sick. Who's ever rang in sick on a Monday morning because they just can't face it? Just don't want to do it. Come on, one hand. Really? Okay,
Sorry,
right.
I wouldn't mind making a point about this. I think I alluded to at the beginning here. I think what this is about is our industry at a fundamental point being able to sort its own ship, out.
Yeah.
I think we need to be able to show ourselves as willing and able to sort our ship out. if we can't, I think other people will do it for us. Sorry. I think other people will do it for us. And we're going to have to start going to things like we need regulation. We need to have people coming and tell us how to do these sort of things. We'll need to be regulated like many other construction who work very long hours and other things like that. And that's what's going to start happening to us. And I think, again, what I'm interested in is how good are we and how capable are we of sorting that out. I think these ideas are nice, well-being managers, things like that, having people support us is really, really, really good. I think it comes more fundamentally about that, is do we really care enough about this to do anything about it? Or are we going to be talking about this next year, having made no progress whatsoever, despite how staggering some of this stuff is?
Yeah, let's have another show of hands. If you were to fall ill, if something was to happen, you were stressed, or something worse, you experienced a mental health illness, show of hands if you'd feel comfortable going and speaking to your boss or colleague about it. 2 hands. I got these guys.
Slightly different work environment to everybody here.
Did you want to comment on that, Colin?
It's very difficult to compare my work environment probably to yours. But the agreement when I joined Habits at Work was we have no holidays. You take them whenever you want. If you want a day off, take it. You work when you want to work. You get the job done. Quality matters. It's outcome that matters. It's not the time that you spend at your desk. So there's a challenge for us in the current work environment in terms of what gets measured and how it gets measured, and that old management mantra around measurement and so on, because it's often measuring the wrong things. We should be looking at what people create for us, not the amount of time that they spend and so on. I'll just come back to this well-being manager point as well. There's a huge danger for your industry and for every other that you treat this as a tick box. A well-being manager could be put in place, but if they have no power to change anything, not only will it, at best, it will have no beneficial outcome, at worst, it will actually sabotage good, well-meaning, attempted change within the business. So it's very important you don't treat this as a tick box exercise, and that you understand where the change has to come from, and the panels alluded to that all the way through in terms of it being a leadership. It's a cultural thing. It's where culture is defined as, in an organization, how we do things around here. If how we do things around here is we talk to each other, we share information, we support each other. We don't bring cakes in for birthdays, we bring healthy stuff in. We go and exercise together. Maybe we have a blowout as well and we have a great time. But there are a whole variety of things that will define that culture, but it's the culture that defines what people do and how people behave. And that's what you need to go to work on in order to create the change you're looking for here. And a wellbeing manager won't be able to do that unless you've got full support of the C-suite.
Sam, did you want to comment on the events culture?
Always. 2 things I'd like to comment on. One, being a bit geeky around meeting design, is I think we are causing our own stress. And I think this is my 2 points. We cause our own stress. One, in terms of meeting design, and not talking about this event, talking about events in general. Packed content. We feel like we have to fill every moment of a delegate's day with content. There's no time to stop. There's very little time to eat, network, learn, absorb the great content that is in the sessions, because you're into the next one, and then you're into the next one, and then you're so crammed, and then you're stressed because you haven't actually looked at your emails or whatever it is that you need to do in terms of your day-to-day job. We are meant to be ahead of the game. We're a creative industry. Why are we still doing this? We're not a baby industry. We've got other industries taking over in terms of the maturity level. Let's stop and think about that as meeting designers. So that's my number 1 gripe in terms of event planners. On supplier side, has anybody died here? Oh no, you'd be dead. That's no good, is it? Okay, let's probably change this. Has anybody died yet? Do not put that on Twitter, Mr. Jackson. Has anybody been fired because they haven't responded to an email immediately? Anyone? Apart from Jason. So we're going to ignore him. Yeah, and he's dead to me now. But I'm really serious. A stat I read was that the average person, we talk about these averages, but let's put it into context, checks his emails or her emails 74 times a day. How many people go to their mailbox 74 times a day? No, we'd all be really fit, wouldn't we, at the end of the day? But we don't do that. And it's, I'm dramatizing a point. I've done it today. I've switched off emails completely. My day is dedicated to being here, to be in the moment, to be present. Now, ask me tomorrow or tweet me tomorrow or influencer marketing me in some way and see if my business is still existing tomorrow. I got a pretty strong chance that it probably is. So my two takeaways are meeting designers in the room, really start thinking about this. It's a really, really big, important thing. And you're going to find that you're going to start getting more people coming to your events because they're going to get more out of your events as well. And number 2 is don't be a slave to that electronic messaging system.
That's brilliant. I think in this industry we have this weird sort of tendency to it's like we're really proud of how hard we work, which is great. It's like, I did a 12-hour day, did 16 hours yesterday. It's like we wear it like a badge of honor. But we all do it. Like everyone in the events industry works hard. It's like a given. But I'm more concerned about what are we doing like everyone has to do it from time to time. I get it. What are we doing outside of that? That's when we have to switch to prioritizing our health and well-being, because we don't work in an industry that's conducive to, we don't work in a society that's conducive to optimal human health, quite frankly, but we definitely don't work in an industry that's conducive to optimal human health. And it's just going to come back to the same punchline, which is we need to prioritize it more. And going back to breaking down the barriers at work, of being able to communicate with, not feeling awkward about communicating with people higher up the hierarchy with you. If you're feeling burnt out, you will be shocked at the response you get if you come to your manager or your boss or whoever it might be.
Okay, I think a lot has come down to trust as well. So I think when you've got a manager working with a team, going back to something like flexible working, for example, or if you're having a really bad day and you're just exhausted because you've done, a really long shift the day before for whatever reason. One of the reasons that comes out of why people want the people in the office from 9 till 5 every single day is because they don't trust them to work on their own. And I'm a big believer, if you have employed someone to be in your organisation, you should trust them. And if you don't trust them to do their job, it goes back to being results orientated, and that's one of the things we believe in Stress Matters. It shouldn't be about how many hours you've done. If anything, work smarter, not harder. That actually, if you get the job done, if you're trusting your team because, you've employed them and you're putting them in front of your clients or your suppliers or your delegates or whoever it is, trust them to do a good job in their own way. You've employed them because they're an individual and they have their strengths and their skills. Let them use them in the way that they need to use them. So actually, if that means they work really well from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. every night, but they're still available for client calls and meetings and everything like that, let them do that. If they're a massive early bird and like starting work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that means they're more motivated when they're working than if they have to wait till 9 o'clock for starting, let them do that. You've employed them because you think that person is a good person. Let that person show how good they are at their job and trust them. And I think it'll make a big difference.
Just to touch on that, I think actually if you're a manager or a business owner and you're worried about when your employees do their work, it's probably because you haven't done your job properly in the first place and you haven't laid out KPIs that allow you to easily track the work that's being done. If you can monitor the KPIs, then why does it matter when the work's being done? You should easily be able to track that.
How many of us here, the events industry isn't a 9-to-5 industry? So why do we insist that people sit in an office from Monday, Friday, 9 to 5, or however long that may be? It should be flexible working that works around the business, works around the events program, but gives people time for rest and recuperation so that they can work at their optimal best and give back. I'm a firm believer, look after your employees, they'll look after the business for you. So it's crucially.
Can I pose a question?
Go on.
Is that why, and it's the audience, but obviously the panel will be able to answer with the microphones. Why do you think you find it hard to trust employees? Because, again, the research is very clear that when people are empowered, when they have control over their lives, so they can choose to do what they want to do when they want to do it. I've been in this environment for 4 years. Prior to that, I was working for a company called Aon. If anybody's ever heard of Aon, it's a horrible place to work. Anybody here from Aon? But it's very traditional in terms of its approach, and it's hierarchical, and you're expected to do the hours and all those horrible things. I have created more in the last 4 years since I've been away from that industry to compared to the last 10 or 15 in there. I've probably put in half the amount of time and generated so much more. The effort is done when I'm walking my dog in the morning, as I wander around the fields close to my home, and that's where I am my most creative. And I get back into my office, and I start, and it just flows. And that state of flow that we try and get employees into is when you're at your most creative, your most productive, and this industry particularly is crying out for it. So back to the question. The question was, is there anything, what's causing the lack of trust?
I don't think it's lack of trust. It's actually change. Change is difficult for everyone. I don't think it's anything to do with trust. I think it's about education, and then I think it's helping manage change. And I think if we did that, we'd be doing the right thing for the industry.
According to psychology today, only 19% of millennials trust their fellow human being. And it makes complete sense why they wouldn't trust. There's fake followers, there's fake jobs, there's fake clothes, there's fake views. There's so much fake news, thank you again. Fake views and fake news, Donald Trump. When you can't trust your president or your government or the people that you've voted into parliament to say what's best for you, you're going to stop trusting your friends. So that's why we don't trust to come in at 9 o'clock or I've got a entirely virtual workforce. I have to trust them. But it's only because it serves my needs. If I had my way, they would be in an office at 9 to 6 and I would feel them and we'd have cupcakes together and go for runs and do yoga. But it's not how it works. And that's the statistical proof.
But we have a real... I'm all about measurement. I'm all about lots of things today, but I'm all about the bass as well. Let's throw that out there. Said I'd bring in a song, didn't I? We are an industry which can put very, very, very clear KPIs into our industry, into our roles, that are very measurable and very simple. I spend a lot of time, because that's my business, doing that. So I think it's inexcusable that we're in that situation, because we are lucky as an industry that the KPIs can be really measurable, your objectives can be very, very clear. So 9 to 6 isn't one of them. So let's go and focus on output and outcome rather than time and worry about the lack of trust.
Yep. We have to wrap up, guys, so you're going to have to be very quick on this one. So you're going to finish? No? Oh, right, okay. There we go. So, that's it, guys. We're going to have to wrap up. It's one of those emotive topics, isn't it, really? You could talk about it all day, all week, or we will be, by the way, EventWell.org. Check that out. We are going to plug. So we're going to plug that definitely. EventWell.org, it's the new resource now for the events industry. You'll find everything, all kinds of information on there. There's going to be events coming up. We've got blog posts on there. There's a support service on there. We've got resources on there from the Mental Health Foundation, Mind. All of the information that you will need is on there. And to announce as well that EventWell.org is officially a social enterprise for the events industry as well. So that's it. Amazing panel. Thank you, guys. I think that was great. And just one final word from me. Guys, we're all busy. We all have stressful, pressured jobs in a creative industry, and that's what we have to remember. We are all creatives. So look after this. That's your biggest asset. Nothing else, your brain. You need that to be creative. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Where's everyone going? Oh, come on. I've got an influencer Wellbeing speech prepared. Where are you all going?
And a burger.
And a piece of cake. I saw your face when Colin said no more cake.
Did you?
Yeah. I wish I'd have had my camera out, because it was.
Not on Team Colin there for no cake.
He's great. He's got some amazing research and some great insights. You should really. Where's? Yeah, you should really. Yeah.